All right, we move on. So the Edge top 40, we are into our top 20. To refresh your memory, number 20, Michigan State. Number 19, we talked about yesterday, a pretty intriguing squad. BYU, the Cougars, with a lot of returning production, a fascinating schedule, and some big questions. So now let's go to number 18. And I'm gonna take a little risk here. Penn State checks in at number 18. Not remembering my rankings off the top of my head, I feel like it might be a little high for Penn State. So, of course, I probably have them at like 14 or something like that. But Penn State, when you talk about returning production, Matt, I think one of the questions is, no matter what the number is in terms of returning starters, this is a team that has been pretty disappointing, I would say, the last two seasons. 500 over the last 2 years, and a grand total of 11-11. A ground game last year that was one of the more disappointing ones in the nation. 128th in EPA per play on the ground offensively. Now you look at it, the key player for them, of course, Sean Clifford is going to come back. So we'll see how much that really helps this team. But from an offensive standpoint, this team has been kind of stuck in the mud when you look at it. Overall, EPA per play, 88th in the country last year. But when 8.5 win total, shaded to the under -125. 5.5 win total in conference, shaded to the over -195. They are an intriguing team nonetheless and a good program, but do have some upward. They got to move up here because they have been somewhat average to below average each of the last two seasons.
Well, James Franklin is got a long-term contract now, and he's been talking for years since he blew that Penn State game a couple of years ago.
The Ohio State game?
Oh, excuse me, the Ohio State game.
The whiteout where he decided to run it up the middle on 4th and 3
this
or whatever?
This program's going to be elite, and he made those bold statements. And since then, the last 2 years, Penn State is 11-11 straight up, and that's not quite elite. So Penn State does catch Ohio State at home again this season, so that's one positive. You got a chance for a huge win on the schedule there. But I think it's time for James Franklin to back up the talk, and he's got the schedule that gives him that opportunity this season. And he's got a veteran quarterback in Sean Clifford, who I rank as the number 2 quarterback in the Big Ten. And if you go back to last season, the Nittany Lions were 5-0 when they went to Iowa, and they led that game 17-7. Sean Clifford went down with an injury, and they lost the game 23-20. They don't lose that game, speaking of the Nittany Lions, if Clifford stays healthy and finishes a game. He went down to injury. They lose. The next week, they lose one of the most ridiculous games in college football history, 20-18 to Illinois and 9 overtimes.
Just how many overtimes, yeah.
So what does that tell you about Clifford and his value to that team?
Right.
He's incredibly valuable to that team. And I think, it's up to him to kind of carry this offense a little bit this year. You don't have the stud wide receivers. They've had some big-time NFL wide receiver talent in this Penn State offense in recent years. They've had guys like Micah Parsons on the defensive side. I still think you got a couple of defensive studs. Maybe the talent is a little bit down on the defensive side.
At least Manny Diaz comes in to take over the defense. He'll be good.
Manny Diaz is a pretty good defensive coordinator. Right. I would not want him as my head coach, but I think he could be a pretty good defensive coordinator for Penn State. But JVT, in general, I like this team, but I think a lot of it is on Sean Clifford to deliver.
Yep.
If he can perform up to what I said, if he can perform at like the number 2 quarterback in the Big Ten, then Penn State could have a really good season. I still would not bet over this win total of 8.5. And as you look at it right now, Penn State's going to be favored in probably 9 games. But you got some coin flip type of games in there too. If at any point Clifford goes down to injury, Penn State's staying under that win total.
Right.
And like you said, the last couple of years, this has been a team that's underachieved, and I think they've got a chance to overachieve this time, but like Sean Clifford's going to have to take it to the next level.
So we're talking about September 10th versus Ohio, September 24th versus Central Michigan, October 1st against Northwestern, the 22nd against Minnesota. We'll take the road game against Rutgers. I would circle those as, if you're going to go over your win total, must-wins for Penn State. Right?
The game at Indiana is a must-win, too.
Yeah, okay, throw that in there as well.
You got 6 must-wins.
If they're going to go over it, right.
Ohio, Central Michigan, Northwestern, Minnesota, Indiana, Rutgers.
Yep.
You got to win all 6 of those games. And actually, you should beat Maryland at home, too, to make it 7.
Yeah.
But Penn State's probably going to lose one of those games somewhere.
Which means you got to steal 2 of what? Purdue, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan
Auburn?
State, Auburn, right?
With the road games, two road games in the first 3 weeks, at Purdue, at Auburn. And then you go to Michigan on October 15th. You got Ohio State at home. You're at Michigan State, or you host Michigan State to finish the schedule. Penn State lost that game in East Lansing at the end of last year. It was cold and snowy that day in the Penn State offense. couldn't pull out the win. I think that was a 30-27 loss in East Lansing, but that was a good Michigan State team. Mm-hmm. If you look at it, you can make an argument that Penn State should win 9 or 10 games.
Sure.
But if Sean Clifford gets injured or he gets beat up or he misses a couple starts, they're in trouble.
And that's what kind of worries me. Like when you evaluate this team as a whole, there was a great stat Athlon had it. Like of the 4 projected starters, 4 of the 5 projected starters on the offensive line for Penn State have started 1 game as a Nittany Lion. Right? Mm-hmm. They're really kind of reshuffling their offensive line, rebuilding that. And we talked about how poor their run game was a season ago. It was partly because poor offensive line play. How that holds up in front of Clifford. If they can't run the ball, all of a sudden do they become insanely one-dimensional? And here's the thing, to your point about Clifford and how well he has played. How about like a little bit better in terms of statistics? If you look at it from a passing standpoint, despite ranking 128th in rush EPA on offense, they were 58th in the country in pass EPA. Yeah. Like that's expected points added. So Clifford did a pretty good job in at least getting something out of this passing attack himself. So I would agree. Like I like him. I think defensively you've got enough. When you look at this overall, they were really good in advanced metrics defensively with some good returning production for the most part, although I think only 5 guys come back. I think you could craft your way here toward 8, 9 wins potentially, but you got to hit those spots that we're talking about and steal one of these coin flips and or underdog spots if you're Penn State.
Let's take a look at that Penn State profile once again because I think the key games I listed are October 15th at Michigan, October 29th at home against Ohio State. Yep. But when you're talking about a win total, I don't think there's a bigger game on the schedule than September 1st at Purdue. Mm-hmm. And that speaks for both teams. Whoever wins that game kind of launches itself toward, I think, a promising season. You lose that game, you have a lot of questions early in the season. I think Penn State fans are going to be on Franklin's back if the Lions lose that opener at Purdue. But that's a game Penn State's a 3.5 point favorite in. Right now, it's a Thursday night in West Lafayette. Gus Johnson's going to be on the call.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a good one.
By the way, so I do save a little face. As I said, I thought Penn State was ranked a little high here. I had them 24th.
I had Penn State 14th. So
okay.
It falls right in the middle. Right. Number 18, essentially.
So,
not quite in the middle, but close.
There's reasons to like him, as we've talked about here. So at this point right now, again,
if Clifford
Penn State
stays healthy and plays to the level I think he can, this Penn State team can win 9 or 10 games, sure.
You should also mention, too,
this is not a win total I bet. I did not bet the Penn State win
And you kind of alluded to it as we've taken our 18th ranked team, Penn State. James Franklin's not exactly, again, as I kind of use that term a lot, like one of those coaches that adds wins at the margins, right? He's not going to.
That's well said.
He's not going to scheme you up a victory.
He's not a bet on coach for me.
Right. So Penn State checking in James Franklin with I don't know. I guess it's not really an important year because, like you said, he signed a long-term contract and there hasn't really been much, it seems, at least in terms of urgency. But an interesting year nonetheless for Penn State, given what you have at the most important position, a quarterback, and the potential in a Big Ten that, of course, as we know, is rife with parity to find your way to 8 or 9 wins this year.
Yeah, the whole Franklin contract situation was curious to me. USC expressed interest. I think
was LSU too.
LSU
right?
was in the hunt too. I didn't know. I was on a radio show in Baton Rouge, and they were asking me about which coach I thought was best fit. I said, not James Franklin. Why would you want James Franklin? He's 11-11 the past 2 years. Why is he such a hot commodity? I thought the same thing about USC. Then Penn State throws a ridiculous contract at him. He's got the schedule this year and the veteran quarterback where it's time to deliver. By the way, the Big Ten has now had 5 teams in our top 40 poll. The voters in the panel, JVT, me, Paul Stone, and Adam Burke of VSiN. The Big Ten teams that appear so far, Minnesota 38, Purdue 37, Iowa 25, Michigan State 20, and Penn State 18. So 5 Big Ten teams. Nebraska actually fell right outside our top 40 at number 42.
Almost there, Nebraska.
Right.
Almost. Well, I think it'll be interesting for Penn State. I would lean under very much so. But I think it is aptly favored, the underprice here for Penn State.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds. Listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.